12 years ago, I woke up in a hospital bed in the ICU, and I was on life support because I couldn't breathe on my own. My arms and my legs were strapped down to the bed like some type of wild animal. And I had just woken from a coma that was the end result of a series of escalating attempts on my own life. And this was after a 15-year battle with major depression. When you're in this kind of situation in the hospital, you can't eat and you can't drink and you can't talk and you can't visit, so you spend a lot of time staring at the ceiling. And I remember vividly one day, I was staring up at the ceiling and I just said, okay, God, you win. You win. And I surrendered that day to the fact that I wasn't going to be happy, that no one was going to be able to fix me. I wasn't going to get married and have a baby like Mark, and I wasn't going to have any type of normal career. And at this point, I didn't just unravel, I had come completely undone as a human. So when you're in the hospital like that, and it was because of an overdose, there are a lot of things physically wrong with you, and I spent the next several weeks getting better and able to leave that hospital. And I had been assigned this psychiatrist who was in a little bit over his head, and he was trying to figure out the next step. And I remember sitting in the hospital room, and I was in my bed, my parents were there, and they were just exhausted and absolutely broken. And he said, the thing that we can do is we can send you to a drug trial in DC. And what I want to show you is that this is the past 10 years of my life. These are all drugs that I was on. They're all different medications. And I look back and I think, after you get through the first page, I would hope that a mental health professional today would not then continue to send me on more medications. And I get that medications work for some people. They work really well for some people, but they didn't work for me. This is a little horrifying to show you. Until today, no one has seen this, but my mom, my dad, and myself. And this was a souvenir that a psychiatric hospital gave to me. I was hospitalized 4 times over that illness. And for some reason, on your way out of these units, as you're going to put the pieces back to your life, they feel like you want a little bit of a souvenir of one of the worst days of your life. And apparently at a time when you needed to be so blonde. I thought I was so cute then, too. But that was a while ago. When I left the hospital, I had blood clots up and down my lungs from being immobile for so long. So one of the things they prescribed me was exercise. I went and I did 2 minutes on an exercise bike, and that was the hardest 2 minutes of my life. I thought that I was running marathons. And it took me a couple of months to get there. And after I got to 2 minutes, I got to 5, I got to 10, I got to 20, and I got to an hour on that bike. And I later read a book by Dr. John Rady called Spark. And in it is where I learned about BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And exercise is one way to increase that in our brain. This is a key protein for plasticity. And what it does is it helps to spur the growth of new neurons, but it also helps to prevent the death of our existing brain cells. When you spend an hour on a recumbent exercise bike, you get bored. And so what I did is I started to add high-intensity interval training, HIIT. And this is where you spend several minutes doing normal aerobic exercise, and then you spend a couple minutes doing really hardcore cycling. And what I learned is that this is a turbo boost button for BDNF. And at the time, I wasn't doing any other therapy for the depression because nothing they had given me had worked. I was under the care of a wonderful therapist named Roxana. And she was the first person. I had just started with her about 3 months prior to that attempt. And she was the first person who didn't try to hover. She was the person who stepped back and gave me the space to start to steer my own ship in this recovery. She gave me a lot of tools that I could try. And then we could talk about whether or not they would work. So because of Roxana, my mother and my father, I'm standing here before you today. I got so good at that exercise bike, and I started feeling so much better that I decided I needed to be outside. And at the time, I hadn't left my house at all for the year prior to the attempt, and then after I was in complete isolation. My father, who had just retired, got the great, lucky job of driving me to doctor's appointments because I couldn't drive myself. I had a lot of anxiety, and social phobias. I never could have come and stood behind or in front of you today. And I decided I needed to go outside. And we had this big, beautiful forest surrounding our house. So I would go in and I would do my run walk, and then I got better in better shape, and I would do a run sprint. And I kept feeling better. And what we've learned is that forest bathing is a term out of Japan, and it actually lowers our stress response. Whether you're depressed or not, it lowers the amount of cortisol in your body. It lowers your blood pressure. It lowers your heart rate. And through brain imaging, researchers have found that it actually lowers the hemoglobin levels in your prefrontal cortex. And why that's important for you is that when we go into a stress response, again, we don't have to be depressed, the hemoglobin levels spike. So 20 minutes in nature compared to 20 minutes in an urban setting are kind of like taking a sedative, popping a pill, drinking a glass of wine, but you get it from nature. So at the end of this forest was a huge lake. And in this lake, I started to find stillness. And we've heard a little bit about mindfulness meditation today. It wasn't a big deal back then, but it was taught to me, and I couldn't be alone with those thoughts back in those days. They were horrifying. So I had this man in my ear, it was an iPod, and he would breathe in and then breathe out, and if your thoughts come up, return to the breath, and write the whole mindfulness thing. And I didn't really think that it was going to work, but I did it, and I sat by the lake. And I have a very compressed amount of time with you today, so I'm going to fast forward. But what happened and what we know about mindfulness, there is a lot of research, and it does a lot of things for us, is that it downregulates the amygdala. And the amygdala is that tiny almond-shaped structure in our brain, the one that sets off our fight response. So this morning at 6:30, my fire alarm went off in my hotel room, and that amygdala worked, and it went to work. And I got up and I grabbed my robe, and I thought, please don't let anyone see me walking down the floor like this. But it went off, and I stayed in my room. The problem is our amygdala is in overdrive because we are stressed out and we are exhausted, and we are under a lot of pressure, whether we're adults or children. So if I fast forward a little bit today to about a year after this, of just adding new things like this that weren't medication-based because that just didn't work for me. All of a sudden, I'm opening up the IKEA catalog. And do you remember when we used to get those? And I would go through, and I was in isolation, so I didn't have anything else to do. And in the back, all of a sudden, I saw this big, huge black and white canvas of tulips. And tulips were my favorite flower. And if you have ever been depressed, then you know that you no longer have a favorite flower. You no longer have a favorite anything because you can't feel anything. You don't feel love. You don't feel joy. You don't feel any kind of passion towards anything that you used to. And it is very hard for people not to take that personally. And we don't mean anything by it because we hate that about ourselves, but it is the disease. And it's a horrible thing to have. And all of a sudden, I liked tulips again. And so I decided that I was going to leave my house and drive an hour to IKEA, and I was going to go to IKEA by myself, and I didn't think I would have a nervous breakdown. And I drove all the way there, and there was no panic attack. There was a little anxiety. And I ran into IKEA, and I got the big, and it was huge, this huge canvas. And then I power walked it to check out, threw my credit card down. I don't think that I looked at the poor woman, paid, signed, and then I walked off, power walked to my car, and I put it in the back seat. And I sat and I death gripped the steering wheel, and I just cried, and I cried, and I cried. And that was the first time in years that I knew that I was going to be okay. And I didn't know how okay I was going to be. I didn't think I would be this okay to come and talk to you. But I knew that I was going to feel again, and that's all that I wanted. So now my work as an advocate and a speaker, I get to talk to audiences like yourself about what's going on in neuroscience. And one of the things that you're going to hear a lot about is the vagus nerve. And it's the 10th cranial nerve, so it goes from our brainstem all the way down to our gut, and it's one way that our brain and our gut talk to each other. And the thing about the vagus nerve is one of its jobs is to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our surfer dude, chill out, everything's going to be okay, we are fine. And then the other part of that is to activate the sympathetic nervous system. And that would be the one that went off this morning when the fire alarm woke me up. So with the vagus nerve, you see implantable stimulators, some that don't need to be implanted. They'll work on things like seizures, they'll work on things like mental illness. They're working on these types of devices for arthritis, for a whole host of things. And there are a number of companies gunning for the vagus nerve because they think it's going to replace some of the medications that we have to take that maybe aren't working as well as we need them to, or are giving so many side effects that it's hard to take them. One way you can indirectly stimulate your vagus nerve, and especially if you don't kind of like to meditate, you don't have time to meditate, is through a simple breathing technique where you just take an in-count breath through your nose for 4 counts, and then you're going to push it out, you're going to purse your lips, and you're going to push the diaphragm down for 8. So you're going to double the exhale. And what this does is it tells your vagus nerve that you're calm, even when you're not. And so you can lie to the vagus nerve, which is kind of what I need to do right now, and it will calm you down. And if you continue to practice that, over time you can slow your normal breathing rate so that your body does act in a better state of resilience, a higher state of resilience, and a better stress response. Another thing the vagus nerve does is it calms the heart rate, but it increases the heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is something that seems to come out of Dr. Jack's lab, and it's basically measuring the change in the time interval between beats. So what we don't want to be is a metronome. We don't want to do heartbeat 1 second, heartbeat 1 second, heartbeat 1 second. We want to be heartbeat 0.5, heartbeat 2, heartbeat 1, heartbeat 0.7. So how do we increase that variability, which means we are having a better stress response, which means we are healthier, is through the breathing technique that I just talked about, through forest bathing, spending time in nature, through exercise, and through enjoyable activities that bring that heart rate back down. The other thing you can do, if you can't get to Dr. Jack's lab, is you can go to a biofeedback provider. You can do what Mark did and go to BioCybernaut, or you can actually go to a neurofeedback provider. And these are people who will take and they will show your brain its own activity so that it can model a peak state. Last year, after 11 years in remission, I spiraled back, and it was really frustrating because I thought that I was out of the woods. And this time it was different because I saw it happening, and the people around me saw it happening because I had spent so much time talking to them about depression and what that looked like. And so I went to work doing all of the things that I talked to you today and some of the things that we didn't have time to talk about. But something that I added that was different was called sound therapy. And I really didn't think this was going to add anything to my life. I knew that it was very helpful with children on the autism spectrum, people with ADHD. But as someone like me who has suffered from depression, I didn't really understand. And they take a very specialized music, and they isolate the frequencies. So they isolate the low, the mid, and the high. And what happens for those of us who are either stressed out, we're dealing with anxiety, we're dealing with depression, or we're just dealing with aging, is that we get hypersensitive sometimes to sounds. Some sounds we muffle and we can't parse the frequencies. And some we just get lazy, just like when we don't exercise at the gym. So sound therapy targets the subcortical region of your brain, and it reorganizes the brain from the bottom up. It also works those inner ear muscles. And with that, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's grounding you, it's creating better resilience, just better joy, better happiness is what it did for me. But the other thing that it does is it stimulates the vagus nerve in a different way. And in that, it turns on social engagement. So with social engagement, you're going to have better focus and better learning and better communication. And if you are interested in the vagus nerve at all, you can look at Dr. Stephen Porges of the polyvagal theory, and he'll blow your mind on all of that. This is one of my favorite studies, and I'm going to move really quickly because we're running out of time. But let's just say researchers took you, and they took someone that you cared about, and they said, we are going to shock the heck out of you. Your brain is going to light up and get ready to be shocked. But when these researchers took you, and they took the loved one, and they said, we're just going to shock the loved one, we're not going to shock you, your brain lit up. And it lit way up. And the beauty of this kind of study is that it shows that we are hardwired for connection, and that we are hardwired for love, and that we're hardwired to feel each other. And I know that if you are mothers, or if you are fathers in this audience, you already know that you feel your children's pain. I know that my mom and my dad felt all of that pain for 15 years, and neither one of them were ever depressed. So what's next? We've already had brain-to-brain telepathy, which Mark likes to talk about. And this is where we've got a professor and assistant professor at the same university but in totally different areas, able to take the brain activity from one through EEG and take his thoughts and control the finger of the other through transcranial magnetic stimulation. And for all of us who just need to feel better, live better, love better, what that means is we're going to end up having a better understanding of each other. We're going to have more transparency. And we're going to be able to monitor those that we loved, our loved ones, whether they're our children or our elderly parents, whether they're our partners in life. We're going to know immediately how they feel. We're going to be able to alter their environment with our thoughts. We're going to be able to alter our own environment with our thoughts. And we're going to be able to self-regulate. And it means we're going to see a collective calming of the stress response. And the global implications of that are something that we can't even imagine. So the gift of coming undone means that someone like me, who was tossed out to a drug trial when medication clearly didn't work, could come back and use science to find solace. I could use science to heal my mind and heal my heart and heal my soul. And the gift of coming undone means that we can take experiences that have caused us shame and pain and great regret, and we can turn them into meaningful work that give us purpose in our life. And the gift of coming undone means that we have this crazy, messy chance to return all of ourselves to the default state, which is the state of connection, deep understanding, and love. Thank you.